with the Department of Planning and Development with Fairfax County. I'm joined by Mike Linsky, who's also with Planning and Development, as well as Bob Pecora with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation. We're very pleased to have you all with us tonight. This is an opportunity to learn about and discuss 6 site-specific plan amendment nominations that have been submitted in the Springfield Supervisor District. This is one of about 16 similar meetings that are being organized over the past couple of weeks and into the next 2 weeks that are giving the community members an opportunity to learn about and discuss the nominations for SSPA nominations that were submitted through the county's SSPA process. So at this meeting, staff from the Department of Planning and Development, as well as the nominators, are going to be discussing 6 nominations, as I mentioned, that are in the Springfield Supervisory District. Mike, if you could advance to the next slide. So here's just kind of a purpose of the meeting. We're here to discuss. This is not a meeting where we're going to be deciding anything. It's not looking at providing a recommendation or advancing anything at this point for approval or further review. This is an opportunity to learn and then provide questions and comments to staff as well as the Department of Planning and Development staff. I will also mention that there are a number of other meetings, as I mentioned, that are scheduled throughout other areas of the county, including a couple that are nearby, just over across the district supervisory boundaries in the Braddock District and Sully District. And there are meetings that are coming up in the next couple of days that are going to be discussing nominations in those areas. So if you're interested in learning more about SSPA as well as the nominations that came in, I will drop a link to the Track a Nomination website where we have the list of meetings, an interactive web tool, and then links to the nominations proper so that people can learn more about them. So with that, again, my name is Graham Owen with Department of Planning and Development, and I will turn it over to Mike Linsky, who's going to be leading us through the next couple of items on our agenda. So go ahead, Mike.
Thanks, Graham. Yep, I'm Mike Linsky, and I'm coordinating the Springfield District nominations, of which there are 6 at this point. So here's the agenda for this evening's meeting. So we'll just give a quick overview of the comp plan and site-specific plan amendment process, and then review those 6 nominations. Okay, so for those of you, a lot of you that are on this meeting are well aware of this, but if you're not, the comprehensive plan, it's something that's required for every locality in the state, and it provides a holistic vision for the future of the county that helps us manage future growth and change. It's a multi-layered document and includes policy goals and objectives, as well as physical planning of land uses and related infrastructure for the next 20 to 25 years. The plan provides recommendations for how land can be used in the future and how and where future growth can be accommodated, and for the protection of environmental and cultural resources. The plan is not regulatory, but is used by both county staff and our elected officials to help guide land use decisions across the county, and then those are then implemented by the county zoning ordinance or other regulations. The different elements of the comprehensive plan include the policy plan, which encapsulates our land use policies and guidance that apply to every land area in the county. And then there are several area plan volumes, which provide more specific land use guidance for individual areas in the county, including area-wide guidance and site-specific recommendations. And the site-specific plan amendment process, SSPA as we call it, that's intended to address site-specific plan guidance. In addition to the area plans, there are also several plan maps. So the foundation of the recommendations found in the area plans is the county's concept for future development that's shown on this slide. And that provided the framework for initial development of those area plans and still serves as the best overall resource for understanding where most of our future growth is envisioned. Each land use classification is represented on the map, and it has associated recommendations for how these areas should develop over time. Suburban neighborhood and low density residential areas are envisioned for little to no change, while almost all future growth in the county is planned to occur within designated mixed use centers. And that includes things like the Tyson's Urban Center, various transit station areas, community business centers, and suburban centers. So 5 of the 6 Springfield SSPA nominations are located within the Fairfax Center area suburban center. So that's one of the designated mixed use centers. And then the remaining nomination is located in an area designated as a low density residential area. The site-specific plan amendment process is one of the county's mechanisms for amending its comprehensive plan, and the process offers an opportunity for anyone to submit a proposal for a change to the plan. It's intended specifically for individual properties or clusters of properties in a small area rather than larger area-wide studies. The process was also designed to allow community members the opportunity to provide input on nominations prior to decisions being made as to whether or not to authorize them for full study as potential plan amendments. And that's the purpose of this meeting, and we appreciate your participating today as part of the process. Each of the nominations we're discussing today has already been vetted for general eligibility and completeness during the nomination and acceptance phases of the SSPA process, and we're now in the screening phase, where each nomination is reviewed for consistency with county policies and priorities. Important issues are identified, and then nominations are prioritized to determine which to include on the Comprehensive Plan Amendment work program for the coming year. We would appreciate your input today to help us evaluate the merits of each nomination, to identify any critical issues, and to begin thinking about prioritization of potential plan amendments and studies. All feedback is welcome, so I encourage anyone with a question or comment to let us know. The screening phase will culminate with a series of Planning Commission workshops at which the feedback received at these community meetings will be considered, as well as staff analysis and nominator input. And a recommendation will be developed for the Board of Supervisors on which nominations to ultimately include on the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program, which authorizes and prioritizes the plan amendment activity for the coming years. There are currently 4 dates reserved for Planning Commission SSPA workshops as listed on the screen. I believe the 4th is sort of a carryover. The first 3 are intended to be the core of the workshop. If a nomination is selected to move forward for review as a potential plan amendment, it will be added to the plan amendment work program, as previously mentioned, and then staff will support the board in prioritizing plan amendments on the work program. If there are proposed amendments, for example, that strongly align with county objectives or initiatives, they may be evaluated sooner than other proposed amendments. And this prioritization may also include evaluating items that are already on the work program in terms of prioritization. And it should be noted that the timeline for considering a proposal added to the work program is going to vary. And regardless of timing, we'll continue to coordinate with local stakeholders regarding the engagement process. If a nomination is not selected to move forward for further review, the nomination will be removed from consideration and will not be added to the plan amendment work program. It should be noted that a property not considered for further plan amendment review at this time could potentially be redeveloped under its existing comprehensive plan recommendations and/or zoning approvals, or a proposal may also be resubmitted in a future SSPA review cycle. However, any nominations resubmitted in the future will need to demonstrate a change in their proposal or sufficient justification for reconsideration. And to put the SSPA process in perspective, this represents just the first of many stages of a potential development process. If a nomination is placed on the work program, it will then be scheduled for a full evaluation as a potential plan amendment. Only after a plan amendment is adopted by the board would the proposal proceed to a rezoning process, which would then require additional review and board approval before finally entering the site plan process and eventual construction. The SSPA process is really just to determine whether or not a nomination warrants continuing to the next step of full review. Before we begin reviewing the nominations, I wanted to quickly define some of the common terms used in the comprehensive plan that will be part of this discussion. 2 of those are the terms density and intensity. Those refer to the quantity of development and will be used in later discussions. Residential density is most often measured in dwelling units per acre. Fewer dwelling units per acre is generally less dense. For example, single-family detached dwelling units are often located in 1 to 2 or 3 to 4 dwelling unit per acre development, and that's considered pretty low density development. Townhomes would be at slightly higher densities, with modern urban townhomes reaching up to about 12 dwelling units per acre range. Older garden-style multifamily apartments can often be in the 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre range, and that's kind of similar in density to the newer style stacked townhomes or 2 over 2 units. And then modern mid-rise multifamily buildings can reach 60 or 70 dwelling units per acre. And when you're talking about non-residential or mixed-use development, it's typically measured by a floor area ratio, or FAR. which is obtained by dividing the floor area of the building by the land area. Similar density, the lower the number, the less intense the development. For example, a development at 1.0 FAR equates to a building size that's equal to the size of the parcel. The building could take a variety of forms, though. So, for example, it could be a 2-story building with 50,000 square foot floor plates that covers half of a 100,000 square foot parcel, or it could be a 4-story building with 425,000 square foot floor plates, and all of those would be 1.0 FAR. So a higher FAR is indicative of a larger development. Auto-oriented retail with surface parking may be in like the 0.25 FAR range, whereas pedestrian-oriented mixed-use developments with structured parking begin to get to the 1.0 FAR or higher range. And then urban transit station areas with high-rise construction can reach over 3 FAR. These calculations also depend on the land area considered, so FAR or density numbers can be misleading if there are large undeveloped or underdeveloped portions of properties. This is a graphic from the comprehensive plan of the Fairfax Center area in which most of tonight's nominations are located. This image shows the area designated as a suburban center in pink with its core area in darker red. The highest planned intensities in the Fairfax Center area currently are in the core area, which is planned in the 1.0 FAR range, with somewhat lower intensities in the remainder of the suburban center. And lower density residential neighborhoods outside of the suburban center are envisioned for little to no change, and those are shown in yellow. It should be noted that while the core area is centered on the location of a planned future metro rail station, the area is not currently planned for the levels of intensity that would be typically planned in a transit station area, which could be in the 2 to 4 FAR range. That's since the anticipated time horizon for metro coming to the area is now outside of the current planning horizon of 20 years. So that level of intensity can't be supported by the existing transportation network. So we're currently not planned at those levels of intensity. Okay, so now we'll get to the nominations. There are 6 nominations being screened in the Springfield district. There were originally 8. 1 was withdrawn and 1 was determined ineligible. So that explains the gaps in numbering. There are also 2 nearby nominations in the Braddock district. Those are shown on that map, and 2 in the Sully district. And those aren't going to be discussed at tonight's meeting, but have meetings coming up in the next week or so. And if you're interested in those, you can look at the SSPA track a nomination website and find information about those meetings. Here again is that Fairfax Center area map showing the 5 SSPA nominations within that area. 3 are clustered in the Fair Lakes area, which is designated by the comprehensive plan as subunit E1 of the Fairfax Center area. The other 2 are clustered in the Waples Mill Route 50 area, and that's designated as land unit K. Both of those areas are outside of the Fairfax Center core area, but they're within secondary nodes of activity within the mixed-use suburban center. And for tonight's presentation, I'll group these clusters of nominations together so they can be considered sort of in the same context, so the numbering will be a little out of order of the numerical numbers. So starting with Fair Lakes, there's nominations SP 001, 004, and 006. Those are all 3 in the Fair Lakes area. SP 004 and 006 are site-specific concepts located on either side of Fair Lakes Circle, east of Fairfax Parkway. SP 001 is a little different. It concerns existing plan options that are currently entitled on individual parcels controlled by the Peterson companies, and those are shown in sort of darker dash red. But the plan allows those to potentially be reallocated anywhere within the green area shown on the graphic, which is most of the subunit. So for a very quick overview of how the adopted plan for subunit E1 works, which is a little complicated, but subunit E1 makes up the majority of the 600-acre Fair Lakes rezoning area, and it was planned initially with an overlay recommendation for office mixed use up to 0.25 FAR for the entire area. And that was pretty much built out by the mid-2000s with about 6 million square feet of development. And that overlay recommendation envisioned office mixed-use development, which included residential only as a secondary use with a goal of a ratio of 1 to 2 residential to primary uses. And then additional plan options were adopted through the 2005 APR process for almost 1.5 million square feet of additional infill development on top of the overlay recommendation. And those options envisioned a broader mix of uses, but still with residential limited to less than half of the additional development potential. And several of the individual options were then later consolidated into a common option pool of intensity that could be reallocated within that green area shown on the map. And so all those particular options are all controlled by the Peterson Company at this point, I believe. And those are the subject of SP001. And then SP004 and SP006, those each concern other separate plan options for 2005 that remain parcel specific. So hopefully that's didn't confuse you too bad. But this is even more confusing probably. But those three nominations are all sort of ultimately seeking the ability to redevelop additional residential uses at some level. However, the majority of the available development potential that's unbuilt is currently planned for non-residential uses. So the nominations are proposing various combinations of reallocating or converting non-residential plan potential from these different sources of planned intensity that you see in this chart, as well as some additional new residential plan intensity. So we have the overlay column there, which that applies, that's the 0.25 FAR that applies to the whole of subunit E1. Then you have the various options in another column, and then the new residential. So this table totals up the quantifications for the three nominations. So it shows that they represent up to 1.7 million square feet of new planned residential uses potentially. Over 1 million square feet of that would be from conversion of currently planned non-residential potential. So much of staff's analysis of these three nominations has focused on the sort of fundamental change this would have on the planned mix of uses for the whole Fair Lakes area, which was initially planned for residential as a secondary use, and it's pretty much been reached that level long ago. So that's led us to suggest considering a larger study of the Fair Lakes area to reevaluate the overall plan mix of uses. But we'll step through those nominations one by one. So this is SB001. So that's a request by the Peterson companies, so they control the intensity from that option pool, which is currently entitled on those parcels that are in red, but the plan as written now allows it to be reallocated anywhere within that green area. So the proposal is to remove a portion of the adopted option text that limits the particular uses to specific square feet of development that's shown on the slide there. Much of the adopted residential potential is already either under development or there's plans to develop in the near future, but the majority of the non-residential potential has not yet been developed. So the most likely result of the proposed change would be for the remaining non-residential potential to be reallocated for residential use. So preliminary staff considerations, and this one, by the way, does not have a specific concept, which normally is required for SSPA nomination, but seeing as there are other nominations in the area with similar proposals to convert residential use, we felt that, because we're thinking that there could possibly be a larger study in the works or something, that it would be good to have this one under consideration. So the preliminary considerations are that subunit E1 is currently planned for a broad mix of uses, but residential is envisioned as a secondary use. And this could result in anywhere from 230 to 330,000 square feet of planned non-residential intensity being utilized for residential use. And those other nominations propose similar conversion from non-residential to residential. So that, as I said before, may warrant a larger planning study of the entire subunit to reevaluate the overall vision for the area and the desired mix of uses. And now, if Andrew Painter, I believe he's on here, if you'd like to present, I can hand it off to you to make a short 5-minute presentation or so.
For a 5-minute presentation, you got it.
And then we can have discussion as necessary.
Sure. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. But thank you very much, Michael. And my name is Andrew Painter. I'm a zoning attorney at the law firm of Walsh Colucci. And joining me this evening is Paul Weinshank. He is the president of retail for Peterson. As Mr. Linsky had mentioned, this is an SSPA nomination that deals with providing more flexibility for already approved but unbuilt density in Fair Lakes. And just by way of history, I think a lot of us know it, but Fair Lakes was originally designed as a Class A suburban mixed-use corporate office park that was originally developed in the 1980s and early 1990s. It has largely built out in accordance with its original planned mixed-use vision. The park has always featured a strong spectrum of retail and office, hospitality, and residential uses. And we are proud that it remains lauded as one of the region's best work environments. Many of you all know Peterson. It's a longstanding corporate citizen, and it was the original developer of Fair Lakes. And as Mr. Linsky mentioned, it has approved but unbuilt density that was allocated to parcels it owns through a series of zoning actions in the 2008-ish timeframe. And as was mentioned, the overlay for all of Fair Lakes is office, retail, hotel, and residential uses at a 0.25 FAR. There's obviously more nuances to it, but that's pretty much how the park has developed over time. In 2007 and 2008, the comprehensive plan was amended to allow certain development options around Fair Lakes. They targeted certain areas that were deemed to be appropriate for redevelopment or opportunity areas or transitional areas. And they granted, the comprehensive plan granted an additional 1.07 million square feet of additional density above that 0.25 FAR level to kind of realize those plan objectives. And they were divided into these land use categories: office, hotel, retail, residential uses. So that was in the comprehensive plan back in 2007. And then in the 2007-2008 timeframe, there were a series of zoning actions that allocated that square footage to Peterson-owned parcels around Fair Lakes. And some of this density was subsequently reallocated to other sites in Fair Lakes that Peterson owned. One was in 2019 with the townhouse project that's currently under construction at the intersection of Fair Lakes Parkway and the Fairfax County Parkway. And then another batch of density was reallocated through recent zoning action late last year for the proposed or the planned self-storage facility off of Fair Lake Circle. So what remains of this 2007 density, at least the way that we've calculated it, is about 594,000 square feet, or about half. The majority of it is residential, and then about 240,000-ish square feet or so is commercial and office uses. 15 years after the allocation of the 1.0 million, 1.07 million square feet, there are certain market shifts and challenges that have emerged that Peterson has looked at, and that includes things like reduced office needs, higher office vacancy, pandemic effects, et cetera. It's no surprise at all that many of Fair Lakes' first-generation office buildings now find themselves to be less competitive vis-a-vis newer office buildings that have more modern floor plates and ceiling heights and amenities. There's also submarkets that Fair Lakes has to compete with. They're newer, they're transit served, they're either proximate to Metro or they're immediately on Metro. They're mixed use, they have strong brand identity, they're walkable, not just here in Northern Virginia, but in the district as well as suburban Maryland. And then, of course, like all office environments, Fair Lakes has suffered from the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has contributed to a decrease in demand and an increase in office vacancy. So while the office density, or while the density that was granted to Fair Lakes back in 2007 theoretically allows Peterson to be able to respond to market opportunities, the company has not been able to fully utilize it, which is borne out by the fact that over half of it remains unused. So we are proposing a more flexible approach, one that would propose to combine those buckets of density into just a single flexible supply of land use generic square footage that could be deployed for residential uses, commercial uses, or retail purposes. And it's a fairly straightforward text amendment that we do believe would result in substantial benefits to the park's overall vitality. And just to be clear, we're not proposing any additional density. We debated that hotly. Should we go for 2 million square feet? Should we go for 3 million square feet? We did not do that in this particular case. We were just merely asking for sort of a universal bucket of density. And that also means that there would be very little impact on the number of vehicle trips. And in fact, if the commercial uses were to be used for residential, that would result in a substantial reduction of vehicle trips in Fair Lakes. We're not proposing any change to the design guidelines that were adopted concurrent with the allocation of the 1.07 million square feet of density in 2007. There would obviously no change to the review process. because this is really all about setting the rules of engagement. Each application is going to have to be evaluated on a case-by-case basis on its merits, just like any other zoning action. And then also, if there would be no material change to the mix of uses in Fair Lakes over what is currently approved. When we step back and we look at kind of sort of the benefits of this, we do feel it would better enable implementation of subunit E1's development objectives. We think it would help retain Fair Lake's position as a best-in-class mixed-use corporate center. It allows Peterson to more effectively respond to market opportunities rather than seeking a site-specific nomination every single time an opportunity comes up. We have to be a lot more flexible now and a lot more quicker to market with things, especially with a fast-changing work culture. We also think it will improve the value of Fair Lakes by optimizing the mix of land uses, by reducing the overall amount of the oversupply of vacant office uses, and achieve a better mix for which there's higher demand. So with that, I will conclude my remarks. Be happy to answer any questions. And again, Paul Weinshank with Peterson Companies is here as well. Thank you.
And I guess we can pause a moment for any questions, or we can also view the other 2 Fair Lakes nominations and talk about that larger context. I think Andrew has to go soon for another meeting. So if you want to ask Andrew any questions now, would probably be the time for that. Anyone? So if not, we can keep moving.
And just for those of you that aren't familiar with Teams, the way that we usually do this is if you want to say something, just raise your hand. There's a hand raise button in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. And if you're on a phone and you're just dialing in by phone, just make sure that you unmute yourself, and that'll let us know that that you'd like to say something.
And just also again, Paul Weinshank is with me. I don't know, Paul, if you have anything to add, but if not, feel free not to add anything. But
yeah, no, I'm going to take advantage of the opportunity to not add anything, because I think you did a great job. I mean, it's really, at the end of the day, we're not increasing the FAR. We're really just simply seeking flexibility and the opportunity to speedily respond to the market.
Okay, now that I share my screen, I can't see if anyone raised their hand or not. So Graham could let me know, but I'll assume we can probably move on.
Yeah, I think we can move on. But if you do think of something later on, feel free to just raise your hand, and we'll do our best to be able to connect you either with Andrew or answer your question if it's related to staff's analysis. So thank you. But yeah, I think, Mike, we can probably move on to the next one.
Yep. So okay, this next Fair Lakes nomination is SP 004. That's a 12-acre site of an existing 290,000 square foot Argonne Plaza office building. There's also an unbuilt entitlement for another 213,000 square foot office building on the property. And that was originally entitled using 113,000 square feet of planned intensity from the overlay recommendation, and then another 100,000 square feet from a site-specific option for office or hotel use on the site. So this nomination would convert all of that unbuilt potential from office to residential use, plus an additional 41,000 square feet of residential potential. So it's coming from a couple of those different pools of intensity, but it's basically proposing to convert mostly already existing office potential to residential use, similar to the last one. And this one is a site-specific one that has a concept. So here's just an overview of the concept, and the nominator can give you a little more information on it. So I guess we can go ahead and, here's preliminary staff considerations. So similar to the last one, the subunit overlay recommendation is for office mixed use with residential as a secondary use. And I think the envisioned ratio, the 1-to-2 ratio, has already sort of been maxed out or exceeded in the past. So it's been sort of a limitation to further residential development until now, which is why we need to deal with this through plan amendments. This would require conversion, as I said, of overlay intensity plus option intensity. And so we're again suggesting that because of all this interest from these different parcels, and there's actually other parcels that didn't get in with an SSPA nomination that have contacted us interested in also looking at repurpose or demolishing office buildings and potentially redeveloping with residential. So there's a lot more potential for that type of thing in Fair Lakes. So it's probably a good idea to look at the entire subunit and reevaluate just the overall vision and mix of uses in light of the current economy and that type of thing, rather than just looking site specific or site by site. So in this case, also compatibility integration with the neighboring office uses on both sides should be considered, as well as potential noise impacts from I-66. And now I can hand it over to Nick Torrance if you have a presentation, or if not, let me know.
And it might actually be Brian Winterhalter who's going to be working on this one.
It is. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Mike. It's Brian Winterhalter. I'm with DLA Piper, one of Nick Torrance's colleagues, and he and Tony Calabrese submitted this nomination on behalf of Grubb Properties. And I'm going to, there we go, full screen. And I'm going to share it with you this evening. The proposal is for a conversion of an existing office entitled land area to residential. You see the project site highlighted in red here. It's north of I-66, east of Fairfax County Parkway, and south of Fair Lake Circle. And as Mike Linsky noted, there is an existing office building on the site, and there is also an approval for an additional yet unbuilt office building in the surface parking area. I know you all know the context very well, but this is just a map to show you some additional background on the site, some of the restaurants and retail opportunities, transit routes in the area of the property. The site is within land unit E1 of the non-core area of the suburban center of the Fairfax Center area. Among other important things to note in the current comprehensive plan, there is a recommendation to that in order to accommodate development, it may be necessary to redevelop existing surface parking lots and or replace existing buildings. As part of this proposal, we're not seeking to replace an existing building, but we are seeking to redevelop an existing surface parking lot, again, with the approved office building that's not yet built there. The site is within an opportunity area south of Fair Lake Circle, as you can see on the screen here. And this is an area that is planned generally for the creation of a walkable neighborhood where people can live, work, and play. And we believe the incorporation of residential development at an appropriate scale in a mid-rise format would certainly further that goal in the comprehensive plan to allow more residential uses for enhancement of the live, work, and play environment in Fair Lakes. With respect to the specific proposal, the property is currently entitled for 213,000 square feet of additional office space. We are proposing to convert that square footage from office to residential, to utilize 30,000 square feet of residential that remains available in the pool of density that Mike alluded to earlier, and to add an additional 11,000 square feet of new residential density above and beyond that existing pool. That would allow an overall proposal of 254,000 square feet of residential development. We envision that the residential building would look like this. As you can see, it's a mid-rise building. It would have a parking garage as well, so structured parking to support the residential units. We envision 400 dwelling units total, and 8% of those would be workforce dwelling units. There would be approximately 100,000 square feet of open space with a number of publicly accessible outdoor amenities as part of the overall site design for the development. Without going into detail on all of the items on the slide, it's important to note that the Grubb Group is targeting a middle income market for this property in this proposed development. Their Link apartments tend to target first-time renters, other young professionals, people who are entering the rental market at a middle level price point. That price point tends to be in the approximate range of 60 to 140% of area median income. So it's not all.
Oh, Brian, I think you're cutting in and out. Can you hear us? Brian, unfortunately, it looks like you froze. All right, Brian, while we try to figure out what's going on there,
See me?
maybe take off your camera. Sometimes that helps with the with the buffering and rendering and everything like that. Can you hear us?
Sure.
Okay.
I can hear. Hang on, let me stop sharing for a second.
Mhm.
Okay, my camera's off. Sorry that I lost you.
No, no worries. We can hear you now. So if you you could probably reshare your screen and take it from there.
Yep, I'm going to do just that. Okay, can you still hear me? Can you see the screen?
Yep.
All right, perfect. My apologies, everybody. Guess I have to get a better internet connection. As I was mentioning briefly, and I won't belabor this point, but the target market for the residential units that Grubb would develop would be for first-time renters, young professionals, generally in the range of 60 to 140% of area median income. So not all, true affordable dwelling units or workforce dwelling units, but generally in the middle of the income spectrum for multifamily residential units. And there would be a significant, component of amenities that you see on the screen as would typically be provided in any multifamily building. But overall, the Grubb team uses an efficient design, and they target this market specifically in the building of their residential projects under the Link Apartments framework. You can see some of those attributes here: intelligent design, high efficiency, tailored amenity programs. I know we're trying to move quickly, and there are many other nominations, so I won't read all this, but wanted to provide this for you all to have it. Overall, we think that this project will promote walkability and activate this area with attractive residential, again, to focus on the live, work, and play environment, and to further that in the overall Fair Lakes area. It will provide essential housing opportunities for middle-income renters. It will enhance the overall environment of Fair Lakes, and we will have additional residential that will support local retailers, restaurants, and service establishments. That's the end of my presentation, and I will conclude. But I did want to add, with respect to the concept of an overall study for the Fair Lakes area, we certainly would be supportive of that, and we believe that our proposal fits very well in keeping with the theme of what the Peterson Companies is proposing and their contemplated changes to the potential opportunities for residential uses in Fair Lakes as well. So certainly would be supportive of that effort. Happy to participate in it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that, Brian.
Go ahead. I guess you could be the MC. It looks like there's at least one hand up. Doug Stewart.
Yeah, hi. Just a question about just integrating with other available uses. I think is the Eastern Market on the east there. Would there be pedestrian access to those, stores and other amenities from this development? And I guess another related question is, why not put in some ground floor retail on this proposed building?
So we certainly would want to have pedestrian connections on the property to facilitate pedestrian accessibility throughout Fair Lakes across this property, and would be part of that solution, certainly as part of the development of this surface parking lot. With respect to retail, it is a challenge for certain locations, and particularly with the efficiency of this building and the market that they are targeting with this proposed development, to have a retail component there. That may be a lot to handle in a small retail component. But I mean, it's something we could consider, and I can talk with the development team about it, but I don't know that it would be the best use for the site.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Stewart. And thank you, Brian. Any other questions on this nomination? And if you're on the phone, just state your name and we can call on you that way.
Okay, I guess I will keep presenting. Let's go back.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks,
you for your
Brian. I
question,
think
Mr.
Brian's
Stewart.
coming back up again.
Oh, yeah. Just real quick,
yeah.
Mr. Stewart, if you could, unless you have a different question, if you could click on the raise hand button one more time, that'll lower your hand, and that way we'll know to call on you if there's another question in the future. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, this next nomination, SP006, this is right across the road from the previous one. This is a 25-acre area consisting of 3 parcels with 3 existing office buildings on there. The proposal would move the 3 existing office buildings and develop up to 1.1 million square feet of residential use on this site, consisting of a combination of townhomes, stacked townhomes, and multifamily. This nomination would also utilize development potential from different sources, including converting the 246,000 square feet of office potential from the overlay recommendation from tearing down the existing buildings, and then converting. There's actually 267,000 square feet of unbuilt office option potential from those options from 2005 timeframe. That envisioned. So there's approved office buildings on some of those parking areas that were never constructed. So there's that pool of potential, and then they're requesting an additional 583,000 of all new residential development potential. So for up to 1.1 million square feet. And this is the concepts we got. There's 2 different concepts. I think the right one has a multifamily building, where the left one just has stacked townhomes and no multifamily. So staff considerations, these are similar to the last 2. So the overlay recommendation for office mixed use, envisioned residential as a secondary use, and that it's sort of maxed out already on residential ratio. And so this requires conversion of 513,000 of adopted overlay and option intensity, plus an additional 583,000 square feet of residential potential. So we're again saying this may warrant a larger planning study to reevaluate the overall vision. I was going to point out too that I guess Andrew and Brian both showed images. There's this graphic of opportunity areas and redevelopment areas it's in the comprehensive plan, but that actually is all. So that provided a little bit of guidance for redevelopment of the area of the option areas of redevelopment of infill sort of, but that all really, the way the plan is written now, it really only applies to that one pool of development option intensity. And so there's really no guidance in there that applies to the whole area, like for redevelopment of the overlay potential. So that's one of the reasons we need to kind of revisit all those other, we've got all the separate pools of intensity, and there's not any overall guidance for the entire area that sort of guides it holistically. So anyway, so in this case, we also need to consider compatibility, integration with the neighboring office uses, loss of existing employment uses. I guess there's 3, major office buildings there that provide an employment base, and then protection of RPA and floodplain that's on the site. And so this one's also Brian Winterhalter, if you want to take over again, if you're still there.
I am still here. Thank you, sir. I will apologize in advance for not turning on my camera, given my internet connection. I don't want to tempt fate a second time here. But I am here on behalf of Radix, the owner of these 3 parcels, to present this SSPA nomination. It's also in Fair Lakes. It is across Fair Lakes Circle on the north side, and you can see the outline of the property here. There's currently 3 parcels referred to as Fair Lakes 1, 3, and 4. They are all existing office buildings. You see the total is approximately 25 acres, and the total of the 3 office buildings collectively is approximately 300,000 square feet. There is also an approval in place for an additional 267,000 square feet. Roughly, if you can see my cursor moving in the middle of the screen here on the 12600 Fair Lakes property. Of the 3 parcels and the 3 office buildings, 12600 and 12700 are struggling quite a bit. And the building at 12500 up here, that building is actually a newer and doing better from a leasing perspective than the other 2 buildings. And I'll talk about that and what that means in a couple minutes. We are proposing 2 options for the redevelopment of the office buildings. with an appropriately scaled residential development, a total of approximately 1.1 million square feet. Option 1 would include 332 townhomes at a density of 13.4 units per acre, which is a 0.75 FAR. The second option would include a mix of 276 townhomes and a multifamily residential building with 320 dwelling units, and that would be at a density of 24 units per acre and a 0.93 FAR. This is the townhouse option. As you can see, it's a townhouse overlay on the majority of the property. We are, of course, preserving the large pond area at the northeastern portion of the property. Again, this is approximately 13.4 units per acre at a 0.75 FAR. And you can see some of the precedent images and how we would envision developing the site with townhouse uses. The second option is very similar to the first. The townhouse and 2/2 layout is essentially the same. And we would have the incorporation of a multifamily building in the northeast portion of the site adjacent to the pond area, rather than developing that portion of the property with townhouses or 2/2s. Again, similar architectural concepts that you see on the screen with some additional concepts for multifamily building. Here's some additional architectural precedent. These are from Stanley Martin, who is potentially partnering with the ownership for the development of this property. These are this is an image of the townhouse units. And these are images in the next 2 slides of the stacked townhouse units. You can see the quality of the architectural design and some of the architectural design in context with the open spaces and other types of public amenities and park areas that would be provided as part of the proposed development. With respect to the overall purpose for this nomination, a lot of which you've heard already this evening with respect to the impact of the pandemic on the office market, and clearly the dramatic shift in the utilization of existing office space. And that, as you've heard from others, and you'll hear from others again, including me, that is negatively affecting older office buildings much more significantly than newer office buildings, and especially in suburban style office buildings like much of Fairfax County and the first generation of development in Fair Lakes. Those buildings tend to have outdated interior layouts. They don't have as many amenities as other amenity-rich areas like Metro. There's less walkability, and there's less opportunity to respond to post-pandemic design imperatives. The ability to utilize land that is potentially available for housing is an important component of the county's planning going forward, given that there is a housing crisis, and clearly there is a need for more housing opportunities, not just affordable and workforce housing, but housing opportunities at all income levels. The county's housing strategic plan identifies a specific dearth of affordable housing and the significant need for additional affordable housing in the community. And obviously this project, if it is to move forward, would provide a significant component of affordable workforce housing as well. The county housing policy also encourages the creative use of land, including land currently zoned for commercial uses like these 3 parcels. Though I mentioned that the 2 office buildings at 12600 and 12700 are more challenged than the 12500 office building. And as part of any redevelopment planning and the overall study that the county seems interested in embarking on, and again, we would certainly be interested in participating in that review as well, and happy to participate in that. But it may be possible for a phased redevelopment of these 3 properties, given that there's different life cycles for each of the office buildings. But overall, we're certainly supportive of what you've heard earlier from the Peterson companies in terms of a need for more housing, for support for the mix of uses, and the vitality of the overall Fair Lakes area. And with that, I will conclude, and I will be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Stewart, go ahead.
Yeah, so adding this much housing seems like a good idea because there are a lot of services nearby. The problem is pedestrian access, transit access, bicycle access is not that good. And Fairfax, Fair Lakes Parkway, Fair Lakes Circle, they're not very amenable to people who aren't driving. And there could also be, I think, things are close by. It's just the design is very auto-oriented, and maybe circulator transit, just some circulator bus service could be to the advantage of this kind of mix of uses. The other, it seems like intrinsic to the development plans, though now it seems like a pretty conventional townhouse development with not much of a network of streets. And I would ask if maybe you could consider improving that to create more of a compact grid. But I guess I also would have a question to maybe Mr. Linsky, is whether the county would be considering some improvements on the adjoining roads to make mixed use work in this area.
Sure, I'll start and Mr. Linsky can follow up. I certainly appreciate the comment. We would very much like to have a more walkable, pedestrian-friendly Fair Lakes area overall. And as part of a county study to be able to do that, and as part of each specific SSPA nomination and potential redevelopment of properties, we, of course, would be supportive of those efforts. So we certainly would be interested in working with the county, working with the community and you all to figure out the best way to do that and to enhance pedestrian circulation. We can certainly tackle what's within the bounds of our property. There are potentially options for how we could support larger planning objectives for pedestrian accessibility overall, and we'd obviously be happy to review that with you and everyone as part of the review of this SSPA nomination. With respect to the grid of streets, or a grid of streets for the overall project, I guess I would say essentially the same, which is that we certainly would be interested in your thoughts and the thoughts of county staff, both in the Department of Planning and Development and the County Department of Transportation, in terms of the best way to integrate this development with the remainder of Fair Lakes from both a pedestrian and vehicular and also for bicyclists and a true multimodal grid network, and how we could best do that. And I think to Mike Linsky's earlier discussion of an overall larger study, to the extent that these nominations are part of a larger study or folded into a larger study, or however the county and the planning commission and the board ultimately decide is the best way to move forward, there's certainly a good opportunity there to plan for what may be a larger interconnected grid of streets, and how we on this project and with this property in front of us can help participate in that.
Yeah, I guess I could, Brian covered it pretty well, but I was just going to point out that, yeah, but that's sort of why we feel that probably needs to be a larger study in the area, just to holistically look at all these types of issues and really make a plan to accomplish these connectivity and different things that would be hard to do on a site-by-site basis, determine what the ideal mix of uses is, where particular uses are best located to support the other uses. And because pretty much every office property in this area is facing the same challenges, and there's a lot of potential for change here, so we need to plan it well. And then a big component of that will be transportation planning, which we have Bob Pecora here, but there'll be a need to holistically look at that as well. I think residential typically would probably reduce the sort of trip generation compared to office use, but it would distribute it at different times of day and things. So it really needs to be looked at holistically as well. And then I guess another point that hasn't been brought up, I guess, with this is that there is a prioritization element of this too. Study of Fair Lakes will take a certain amount of resources. It's probably something that needs to be done, but then we have to consider also, we have an ongoing study now for the core area of Fairfax Center, sort of follow up on previous Fairfax Center area studies. This one is, and there's a transportation study involved with that at this point. And then there's an upcoming study of the government center campus area. So there's a lot going on in this area. Plus we have a couple more nominations coming up in another part of Fairfax Center, and all of these areas sort of need looked at some point. So there'll be a certain element of prioritization that has to happen, and that'll be for the board to determine with staff's help, I guess, and see what we can realistically look at in the next couple of years. But ideally, I think it'd be good to look at these things holistically, and we're moving towards trying to provide flexibility for uses within boundaries. It's just a matter of having well-planned, boundaries for the flexibility instead of having to come in site by site every time somebody wants to do something and replan that way. So, that's the purpose of SSPA, I guess. But it's also good when you have these commonalities coming out, have these different nominations coming out in clusters. It's good to identify that and sometimes back out to a larger study area. So anyway, so if is there any other questions on any of these Fair Lakes applications, or the next ones will be moving to a different area?
Well, as you move to a different area, I will briefly turn my camera back on. Hopefully it won't crash my computer, and I will say, have a good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity. And we're certainly looking forward to working with you on these nominations.
Thanks, Brian. Let's see. Okay, so now we're moving to Land Unit K of the Fairfax Center area. So that's over Route 50 and Waples Mill area, right at the intersection of I-66 and Route 50. And this was, most of Land Unit K was developed as an office business park. So we have two nominations here, SP002 and SP003. Let's see, so like I said, most of the area was developed. So there's a common recommendation we're talking the overlay recommendation for office use up to 0.5 FAR, but then there was residential options created quite a while ago now for the Fairfax Ridge residential development that exists in the southwest corner there, and there's another residential development right next to it. But the rest of the subunit was developed under the office at 0.5 FAR recommendation, and you can see it borders the city of Fairfax. So the first of the two nominations is SP002, Fair Oaks Business Park. So that's almost 23 acres, and so I guess the proposal is to eventually demolish and replace the existing office park with a mixed-use development consisting of residential, office, and possibly continuing care or assisted living, with some ancillary retail in 5 to 6 story buildings up to about 1.2 FAR. And here is just a quick shot of the concept. I think the nominator will go into more detail into that. So staff considerations, right now there's a variety of surrounding uses, including there is some residential over in the city of Fairfax, but also office, retail, hotel, and light industrial uses. So compatibility could be an issue at this point. And then it also shares an overlay recommendation with most of Land Unit K. And there's one other nomination for residential use in Land Unit K under that same recommendation. And we've also heard a little bit of other interest from other properties in that area that also didn't get in SSPA nominations. So this is another one where this may warrant a larger planning study of the entire land unit to reevaluate the overall vision and desired mix of uses. Something to consider anyway. And then also in this case, considering the impact of the loss of sort of small affordable office spaces as compared to the large corporate office buildings, this one provides, small, more affordable office space for a variety of community serving uses, nonprofits, and different things. I don't know if that's really been looked at as much as countywide as some of these larger office spaces. There's also connectivity within the larger suburban center and also to the city of Fairfax. So if Adam Cook, I think I have Adam's slides here. If you want to, are you there, Adam?
I am here. Good evening. Do you have my slides up, or would you like me to up? Great, right there in front of me. So, well, thank you. Thank you for turning it over. You know what? I'm going to be brief this evening because I think sometimes projects speak for themselves. But before we go to the next slide, I just want to say of everything that we'll look at tonight, this may be the best example of something that really fits the intention of what we're looking at from the original comp plan. This is a true mixed use development where you really do see that blend of retail, commercial office, and residential all in the style of which we need and which, you know, the current economy and preferences will bear. So it's really a community focused on providing a exciting, vibrant retail, restaurant, entertainment front door, focused and centered around a business community that is driving health and wellness, and ultimately providing housing that's aligned to that need for additional housing that we've talked about previously in other submissions. We can go to the next slide, please. So here's an overlay of what the property looks today. You know, you made an interesting comment about having not-for-profits and other organizations in this development, and that there's a place for those smaller businesses. Unfortunately, this property was developed more than 40 years ago, and most of the facilities are in states of array where the capital investment needed to maintain them into the future isn't really merited. So these properties are looking at a redevelopment opportunity, whether we like it or not, unfortunately, due to the state of disarray that the property was in from its previous owner. So we recently purchased it. We've exhausted extensive capital to bring these buildings up to operating standards, but also, as previously mentioned, this is a development really focused on wellness and well-being and healthcare service providers, which are a lot of the tenants in this space today. And the spaces post-COVID aren't supportive of the type of standards that we expect from indoor air conditions and other health and wellness conditions that you would anticipate, particularly in environments of advanced care. So as we look forward to doing this, that's one of the things that we're really excited about, is it's not just a mixed-use development that really focuses on those three pillars of retail, commercial, and residential, but there's a huge bent on wellness in this, ranging from the types of tenants we anticipate to occupy the commercial office buildings, the medical office buildings, to the green open community spaces that are connecting in the future design of this. And ultimately, if we look at this area K, the land unit is really unique in the overall Fairfax County area. It's flanked by 66, 50, and of course, Fairfax Town. So it's really kind of isolated and provides the opportunity to be more creative in our design and our solutions as it finds itself standing alone in this fragmented triangle. If we want to go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit more about what the development will become. So as we look at the opportunity here, you can see there's a mixed use of everything happening here, ranging from around 100,000 square feet of office space, likely more than 100,000 square feet of retail space as well, restaurants, outdoor eating environments, entertainment, and ultimately a mix of residential that not only has denser communities, but also 2-over-2s, as well as providing continuing care. So I think, as mentioned in the fine print of some of the statements earlier, we are one owner in this development. Another partner in this submission are our friends at Innova, who are also an owner of this current development. And several of the tenants that reside in the existing business park do focus on care, whether it's dialysis, memory care, a special daycare for folks diagnosed with different variations of autism. So there already is an attraction here for healthcare providers. We just want to enhance that environment and provide up-to-date environments for them to practice that environment of care, as well as creating a vibrant retail front door to the overall development to serve the full community. And if we want to go to the last slide, I said I'd keep it brief and I'll end on this. This just gives a high-level overview of the phasing and some of the densities of some of those different areas. So Area A really focuses on that retail and entertainment front door and begins to get into some of the office product. As you get into B, that again is some of our residential product. As you sequence down into phase C, this is again where it's a homogenization of all of those products coming together. And this is likely where the continuing care or aged care, assisted living services would be as well. As you flip over to the right-hand side of the development, again, you see some of that more densified multifamily edging up to the taller commercial buildings in Route 66. And as we transgress and evolve over to the town of Fairfax, you can see that we are bringing down the elevation, bringing down the density, and focusing on some of those townhome 2-over-2 units. So it really is a transitional neighborhood focused on what are our neighbors in every direction, as well as what are those three pillars of retail and entertainment, commercial and multifamily that we need to create a vibrant community that is really forwarding that comprehensive plan that's already in place. Thank you.
All right, so if anybody has
Graham,
any questions
I
or
can't see
comments.
the participant list anymore, so if you can let me know if there's any.
Yeah, I was
questions.
just checking. If anybody has any questions for either Adam or Mike, feel free to raise your hand. And if you're on the phone, you can just speak and we'll make sure that we're able to call on you. Okay, well, I think without any further ado, thank you, Adam. I appreciate it. And
Yep,
thank you, Mike.
thanks,
everyone.
Adam.
I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so this nomination SP003, it's not far from the last one. It's a 6-acre site with 2 existing office buildings as well as a detached parking structure. The proposal would be to demolish the existing office buildings and replace with multifamily residential consisting of up to 400 units at an FAR of 1.5, and it would retain the existing parking structure. So here's their concept, which we'll have a presentation in a second. So staff considerations, this is surrounded by residential development already, but it's planned and developed at 16 to 25 dwelling units an acre. So this proposal is higher density, 65 dwelling units an acre. It's a different building type than was built back when those were built, but something to consider. So and integration with that existing residential context ought to be considered heavily. It also shares overlay office recommendation with most of land unit K, the same one that the previous nomination comes in under. This one is slightly different in though it is surrounded by residential and it's on the other side of Waples Mill Road from most of the other office. So it is a little distinctive in its location. But there is, at least there is that one other residential nomination in the land unit and there are other interests in the area. So it's another one where we at least should consider whether or not to plan the larger land unit to reevaluate that vision and desired mixed uses. This, in my mind, is a little less clear cut than Fair Lakes as far as whether it's appropriate at this point, prioritization wise and all that, to do that, or like I said, especially this nomination, it would make a little more sense to look at this one independently because of its location. And you could maybe make an argument for the other one too. So it's a conversation to be had as far as whether this warrants a larger planning study or not. That's something we could discuss if necessary here. I guess Bob Brandt, do you have a presentation?
Yes, I do, Mike. It's a very brief one, perhaps the briefest presentation I'll ever give, but no, I appreciate your introduction and your overview. I'm pulling up my screen now, but just to introduce myself and a couple of folks on the call right now. I'm Bob Brandt. I'm a land use attorney at the law firm of Walsh Colucci, and I'm pleased to be here tonight with a couple of folks, both Brad Gordon and Richard Reckney. Brad and Richard are with Time Equities, which is the owner of this property and the nominator behind this plan amendment. And so, again, we're happy to be here, and Mike, appreciate the work that you and staff have put into this thus far. Just to kind of reiterate, I've got an image up on the screen that shows this property. It's about a 6.2 acre piece of property on the west side of Waples Mill Road and kind of bounded by that semicircular loop road, Fairfax Ridge Road. Mike, as you mentioned, the property is uniquely positioned. It's on the western half of this land unit K, and it's already surrounded by predominantly residential development. And so we do believe that this proposed plan amendment to convert what is currently planned for office use to residential use is very much compatible with the surrounding area and the existing pattern of development on this side of the land unit. Just looking at the screen right now, you've got the Fairfax Ridge condominium, which kind of wraps around the west side of Fairfax Ridge Road here. There is existing multifamily residential development here at the intersection of Waples Mill and Fairfax Ridge Road, and also here on the northern part of the property. So again, it's proposed residential development here is very consistent with the pattern of development in the surrounding area. Just to take a quick look, this is an excerpt of the zoning map, and again, that pattern of development in the area. All of the properties that surround it on the west side of Waples Mill Road are currently residentially zoned. The non-residential uses on the opposite side of Waples Mill Road. This is the NRA headquarters building right off 66. There's a number of other office and other non-residential uses on the other side of the land unit. And so, but I think as you can see from this image and the one I had up previously, this side of the land unit really has developed over the years a residential character. We think that that's for a reason. This is a great location. It's very proximate to Interstate 66, which you see here runs along the northern part of the screen, and also to Route 50. And so in terms of access and convenience to retail and other amenities in the area, this is a pretty fantastic location for proposed residential development. Take a look. This is a bird's eye view of the property from the north, so facing south. This is Waple Mills Road that kind of snakes along here on the left side of the screen, the Fairfax Ridge condominiums. You can see here some of the existing site features start to take place. One of which is this two-level parking garage that's here on the right side of the office building on this image. That's a two-level parking garage. It serves the office buildings today, but it's structurally in very good shape, and so there's an opportunity here to reutilize that and repurpose that for the proposed residential development on the property. A little bit about these office buildings themselves, and here you can get a pretty good look at them. They were built in the early 1980s. There's about 218,000 square feet of office on the property today. They're approaching the end of their useful lives, and for the same reasons that some of the other nominators already mentioned this evening, office at this location and throughout the region, the demand has changed for it. These buildings today, and I think this is a pretty compelling statistic, these buildings today are only about 20% occupied, and so the demand for office just isn't what it was, let's face it, when these were built in the early 1980s. And so for that reason, Time Equities, the nominator, thinks that looking forward to the future of this property and this site, residential is an appropriate consideration here. Just to spend a little bit of time talking about the concept plan that was submitted with this nomination. You can see here that the proposed residential buildings, these cream color buildings here, are roughly speaking in the same location as the existing buildings are there today. The existing buildings are surrounded by surface parking in addition to this parking garage that's here to remain. We think that there's an opportunity to replace some of that surface parking area with amenities, open space, usable open space. And so we'll be looking to replace those surface parking lots with outdoor open space in the future. But that garage there will remain from a sustainability standpoint. We think that's a big positive. We'll be able to recycle, reuse, repurpose that existing garage for its intended use moving forward, and that's a big benefit here. In terms of the proposal, and obviously there will be a much more detailed plan submitted moving forward once we get out of the planning stage and into the rezoning phase. But the proposed development that we're talking about is about 385,000 square feet. That's a little bit under a 1.5 FAR, floor area ratio, which is consistent with the nomination. And the 385,000 square foot residential buildings would include approximately 400 residential units and be at a height of approximately 70 feet. And when you look at the pattern of development surrounding the building, there's the existing multifamily building here. It's a 5-story building with a structured parking garage. The proposed height and scale of what it is that Time Equities is proposing is very compatible with that pattern of development. And so I told you I'd be quick. I'm going to hold myself to it, and we're here to answer any questions that you might have at this point. But we are looking forward to working with staff and moving forward through the SSPA process. So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Bob. And does anybody have any questions for Bob or for Mike? And while others are putting their hands up, one question I have for both Bob and for Adam. As you may have seen in our one-pagers, we've kind of floated this idea, and I think staff is still considering, kind of what we think is the best approach with this. But as Mike indicated, the Fair Lakes nominations, there's a lot of there's a lot of similarities amongst them. They're kind of asking for similar request, dealing with, the same planning geography. So in that one, a recommendation, if it's added to the work program, would be to do a subunit study, looking at the broader area, since it's, all of those nominations are impacted by the same plan recommendation. I guess the similar question, we're not as, I guess this instance with the land unit K, you have this nomination as well as the one that Adam just presented on. They're different. This one's a residential proposal, whereas Adam Cook's is, a more of a residential mixed use. There are some similarities, but I wanted to get, both of your thoughts. I think Adam's still on the call about, what are your thoughts? And we don't need a formal answer now, but what are your preliminary thoughts, if you have any, about that idea of doing kind of a broader study looking at the whole of that land unit?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and respond first. I don't want to speak for Adam, so Adam, feel free to chime in. I think that's certainly a conversation we're willing to have. But for the reasons that Mike mentioned when he was giving his presentation, I do think that there's probably an opportunity to look at this one, if not both of them, from a site-specific lens. I think this one, for the reasons Mike said, given where it's physically located within the land unit, given that everything, at least on this side of Waples Mill Road, has developed in a residential way, very consistent with this proposal, I think that there's probably an opportunity here to look at this one in a site-specific way. Adam, I'm sure, will agree on his proposal, but I think that's something that we, the nominator, Time Equities, is certainly willing to explore with staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is Adam here. I think, we want to be a good team player here. My concern is really speed. Upon being accepted to the next phase of the SSPA process, we're ready to immediately jump into the rezoning process to really help accelerate the redevelopment. And my concern is doing a broader study would be held back from, realizing the potential of this area. And it would take, 10, 15 years to redevelop when we're looking to really move at a much more accelerated pace, because the demand is now and the product is really out of date and insufficient and taking way too much capital to maintain. And we're going to lose tenants based on that anyway. So frankly, we're ready to go. We're excited to go. And we think we have a great mixed use offering, which is unique in the competitive set here of other things coming to the marketplace. So we want to take advantage of that and bring that to the community.
All right, thank you. Thank you both. That's helpful to know. I appreciate that. Next is Julia and Sam Braden. Go ahead.
Thank you. So these last two have been very personal for my husband and I, considering we are staring at our roof. But we do agree. We do think that this area it's really great. It's near the highway. It's in this great little pocket at the intersection of a bunch of, good, busy streets, but we do feel a little forgotten. It's very sleepy. It's quiet. So these proposals are very exciting to us. So I just wanted to share that from from two people who live in the Fairfax Ridge neighborhood. I do have a question about the last one. Would the proposal be for apartment housing or like condos? What does that look like? Yeah. Like rentals or?
So I'll ask Brad and Richard from Time Equities to just chime in and confirm this. I think that it's very early. It probably could be both, but I think at this point they're probably leaning toward rental, if I'm not mistaken. And Brad, okay. Richard, you guys can confirm that.
Yes, that's correct assumption.
Yeah,
it's going to be rentals.
Yes, you're right.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Simply wondering, but I just wanted to share our positive thoughts about these. So thank you so much.
Thanks. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Julia. And does anybody else have any questions about this nomination? Okay, well, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Brad and Richard. Really appreciate you coming out tonight.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Mike.
Yep, thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, we're moving right along, I guess. So now we're finally moving out of the Fairfax Center area to our final nomination. Oops, I think I had my mic off there. Sorry about that. So we're moving out of the Fairfax Center area now and to our final nomination, SP 007. This one's located in a low-density residential area off of Braddock Road, just across from Patriot Park in the Twin Lakes planning sector of the Pohick District. This property is currently planned for residential use at 0.1 to 0.2 dwelling units an acre and private open space, and it's zoned to the Residential Conservation District. It's in the Water Supply Protection Overlay District. It's also heavily impacted by Resource Protection Area and Environmental Quality Corridor. It's got a perennial stream running through one of the parcels, so lots of environmental features. There is an existing small office building on the site, so that has been permitted as an existing non-conforming use. It was pre-existing when the whole area was down zoned to the Residential Conservation District. So it's allowed to continue operating as an office use. Let's see. So yeah, the proposal is an option to support a garden center use. So I guess, sorry about that. Here's the rough proposal. So there's two parcels. This is tilted sideways, I think. So north would be to the right. And so staff considerations, like I said, these parcels are located within a water supply protection overlay district and zoned to the residential conservation district. And the garden center use is considered a commercial use per the zoning ordinance, and that would actually require rezoning out of the RC district in order to implement, which would be counter to longstanding county policies and area-wide planning objectives. So staff could not support that proposal. And the property has multiple permissible uses in its current planning and zoning. You know, it's got the permitted non-conforming office use that can continue to operate as an office use, and also it could be used as residential property as well in the RC district. So that's staff's considerations. But we can hear from the nominator, Sarah Mariska.
Thanks, Mike. Let me share my screen. Can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear and see my screen? Sorry. Great. As Mike mentioned, I'm Sarah Mariska. I'm an attorney with Odin Feldman and Pittleman, and also on tonight's meeting is Mark Kincaid with Premium Lawn and Lawn Landscaping, who owns both of the parcels that Mike touched on tonight that are outlined in blue on your screen. Premium Lawn and Landscape has owned that existing office building and operated from it for a very long time. And let me just flip forward. I'm making sure, there we go. So as I mentioned, this is along Braddock Road on the south side. It's flanked by very large single-family dwellings. One of the parcels is heavily vegetated, and the other is currently developed with that non-conforming office building that's used by Premium Lawn and Landscaping. These images show looking from Braddock Road, and I wanted to put these on because nothing is proposed to change with this nomination from the views that you see. This is a little bit of a different nomination and certainly very different from all the discussions we've had earlier tonight. So we are ending on a little bit of a unique note, but this is a non-conforming office building has existed on the site for a very long time that has been used for Premium Lawn and Landscaping, a locally owned landscaping business. And Mark, who's on the line, has thought about establishing a plant nursery on this site, which would be a community serving amenity to his existing customers and could serve this part of Fairfax County and potentially decrease trips that are currently occurring because it has been challenging to find nursery stock in a convenient location. So what we had previously filed was a special exception on the smaller parcel that is currently occupied by the office use. We indefinitely deferred that application a number of years ago because Mark was in conversations with the adjacent property. Those discussions were very protracted and has taken a long time, but Mark was successful in acquiring the additional 3.5 acre parcel that is reflected on the bottom part of this slide. What Mark is thinking about doing really is providing this community serving use in a convenient location, but proposes no land disturbance of any kind, really would just provide this use as an amenity to his customers and the community. And the benefit, or that we believe in this, is that the site would be preserved in perpetuity, particularly the environmentally sensitive property on the southern side, or the bottom side of your screen, actually the eastern side of the site, would be preserved, which is, as Mike mentioned, there's a number of environmentally sensitive features on this site that could be and would be protected in perpetuity with this nomination. Mark is on the line and probably has a few more comments to make. And really, we are here tonight to present this, and we look forward to further conversations if this were to proceed forward through the process. Mark, I think you're on the line, and I think your microphone was working earlier. So if you have anything to add to my comments, please feel free.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you guys very much. The thing about this site is that it's been in existence for well over 25 plus years as multi-uses, from an office that was burned down and rebuilt, and the site was developed through different ownerships over the years. And as it exists, it's a fantastic opportunity to provide the community with a very boutique style garden center. There's a lot of residential around here, as everybody well knows, and the county just developed a park and a athletic complex across the street, which is unique in the sense that it's going to bring a lot of local residents to a concentrated area that we think would be a great opportunity for them to be able to see natural gardens, native gardens, areas that would be easily replicated or installed in their own residence, from townhomes to single family homes. And that's what we want to present on this property, is a boutique style garden center, very similar to what exists in other parts of the county through Heather Hill Gardens down in Lorton, Knowles Produce up in Alexandria. These are very small boutique style centers, not retail locations by any means. Areas where residents locally can come in and take a look at native species of plants, work with designers and work with managers that could easily implement this or replicate it into their own residence. The nice thing about this is that there's nothing that needs to be redeveloped. You know, this is an existing area. All the gravel areas are existing. All of the wooded areas and green space would exist as it is today. Nothing needs to be redeveloped or regraded. There's no environmental impact. The RPA that is there would be undisturbed. We're not asking for any exceptions on that. And again, we have, cisterns in place that could provide irrigation for any of the plantings that we have, any of the woody plants, all of the new development propagation, and we wouldn't rely on anything outside of that. From obviously, there's no county water there now, but the best part is that we wouldn't impact any of the RPA with that, because it would all be on the existing property. It's a little bit different than what you guys have seen, in the sense that we're not trying to redevelop anything. We're just trying to provide an opportunity for the community to have kind of a boutique and unique experience within their own neighborhoods.
So with that, we are happy to answer questions that folks may have today or in the future.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mark. All right, I think we'll open it up to anybody that's on the call that has any questions. If you would, just raise your hand. Okay, I have a question for Sarah or for Mark, just regarding the office. You mentioned that the site's not served by county water today. How does the office have water? Is there a well? Is there some other means of getting water for the office building?
There are. So there are actually 2 existing wells on there. And one well is actually currently in operation for the office. And then it's on county sewer.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the clarification. Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes.
Is that Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Brown. Thank you.
Yes. I was wondering about the volume of traffic to start with that you would have on there, because right now, to get to that area, if you're headed west on Braddock Road, you have to go all the way up and make a U-turn and come back down to access that road, to access the property. And would there be any changes to the roadway there to allow that? Because if you've got a lot of traffic going through there, that's going to be a nightmare, and it's going to probably have accidents.
So when we actually started off with the special exception several years ago, we actually had VDOT do an analysis of that on whether or not we'd be required to have a turn lane or a deacceleration lane or anything of that nature. And based on what we were looking to do with the site, the VDOT study determined that we were not going to need to do any additional deceleration or acceleration lanes based on the current volume of traffic on Braddock Road, as well as what the demand would be for the property. And then in addition to that, with the development of the Willow Springs property with the park and the athletic fields across the street, Fairfax County has already redeveloped that intersection that has a stoplight on all directions within several hundred yards of our property.
I would also just add to what Mark is saying is that we have the analysis that we had previously done was that this would not be a significant increase, and the goal and part of the benefit was that this would be serving folks that live in the area and would be capturing existing trips, not necessarily increasing the trips beyond those that are already on the road. But certainly happy to provide more details as we go through the process.
Hey, Mark, have you got any idea how far west that stoplight's going to be?
The stoplight's existing at Willow Springs and Braddock, and to the best of my knowledge, it's roughly about 300 yards from our driveway.
So that's where the U-turn would have to be.
Correct, unless you were coming from the park or the athletic center, which.
Right.
Now, for the planning guys, does this require commercial zoning?
I was just about to ask Sarah that question, actually, as far as how you would plan to implement it, because that's our initial, that's our biggest issue, is just that, I think it'd be hard for us to support rezoning out of the RC districts, but how would you would have to do something like that in order to implement?
So no, we would have to rezone this out of the RC district. That is the impetus for the plan nomination, is that we would have to do a zoning to a higher zoning designation. However, it would still be a residential zoning category, and it would be one category higher than RC. But I think one of the benefits that we are hoping could be accomplished with this is that even though we would be proposing a rezoning to a different zoning category, we would be, prohibiting all other uses other than what we would be proposing as part of our zoning application, and we would be proposing that one of the parcels, or 3.5 acres, would remain in its existing undisturbed vegetated state in perpetuity and would allow for preservation and rehabilitation as may be necessary. And certainly we would be happy to prohibit any other uses that were undesirable. So I know that staff has raised the concern of the potential for higher intensity, but our intention is really not to do something that would change the existing conditions on the site, would not increase the density or intensity of the use, and would hopefully allow for preservation of a environmentally sensitive property for the future. So that's my thought, Mike, and certainly it's something that we are happy to refine as we go through the process.
I do have one last question, and I'll be quiet. On that existing 3.5 acres, I believe I heard that they're not going to touch that. Is that true?
That's right. That's our proposal, is that we would not touch that property at all. And Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have purchased that. Mark owns that and has no plans. I mean, certainly we would talk to the county to the extent we need to think about any invasive species management or any rehabilitation of any of the features on that property. But our proposal as it stands is not to touch that property at all.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. I'm wondering because it could devalue the property next to you.
I beg your pardon?
It would be more like if you were developing it, it would look like a commercial enterprise there, where you got roads and things like that in there, growing trees and everything, that it would diminish the property value next to you. I mean, because that will stay residential unless they're allowed to convert that to commercial also.
For the surrounding properties, almost all of the properties around the existing area have a wood buffer. And then on the west side of the property, we established an evergreen boundary there several years ago by planting arborvitaes. If you see on the map there, you'll see there's 2 new constructed houses that came in after the fact. But as you can see on the blue dotted line on the west side of the property, there's already an evergreen screen that's been established there. None of that would change. And then if you look on the south side of the property, you can see that there's a 40-foot wooded buffer that has been there since the 80s, obviously. That will all remain. None of that will change.
Okay.
And that's the whole thing with this proposal, is that we don't have any desire to change the footprint or the environmental aspect of this property. All we're trying to do is utilize the open space that's currently there.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, if anybody else has any additional questions, now would be the time to raise them. And again, if you have any questions that you think of after the meeting, we'll drop an email address into the chat just so you have a copy of who to get in contact with, and we can follow up with you following that. But last takers, anybody have any questions about the nomination? All right, well, thank you very much, Sarah. Good to see you again. And thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the feedback.
And Mike, do you want to pull up the last couple of slides?
Okay, what do we got left here? Yep, so that's our last nomination for the evening. So as mentioned before, this screening process will culminate in planning commission workshops. Those are scheduled for these several dates here, February 22nd to March 15th. And then as well as there's other community meetings coming up in the neighboring districts if you have any interest in that. Otherwise, these will go before the Planning Commission. They'll hear any feedback they received at these community meetings, as well as staff recommendations and nominator information. And they'll make a recommendation to the board on what they feel should be included on the work program. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact me at that email or phone number. That's probably about all we have here. Yep. So we appreciate you all coming. And like I said, let us know if you have any additional questions or comments after the fact. And we'll make sure to get those to the Planning Commission for their workshops. And I appreciate all the nominators presenting.
Yeah, thank you all to those of you that provided questions and comments. We really appreciate your time and taking an evening out of your week to be here with us to learn more about the land use proposals in the Springfield district. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. All right, I guess with that, we can end the meeting. So thank you all very much and have a good night.
Thank you.